Welcome to the podcast of the Deccan Centre for International Relations. The Deccan Centre for International Relations is a think tank under IFMR, Institute for Financial Management and Research, which is actually one of the well-known institutions since 1917. The Deccan Centre was inaugurated 2 months ago. It is located in Chennai and is focused on international relations and even more specifically on South India's global engagement. This includes the 5 southern states as well as 3 union territories. And we focus on geopolitics, technology, business, diaspora, etc. Today, we hope to focus on the defense and security aspect of our region, considering that South India has a huge coastline as well as the presence of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and also touch on some of the changes that are being contemplated in the military domain in India. Today we have a very special guest to speak to us, Lieutenant General Arun Ananthanarayan. General Arun has had an illustrious career of more than 4 decades in the army. He has been the former Chief of Staff, Southwestern Command, and former General Officer Commanding of the Dakshin Bharat area. He has served as the Head of Strategic Planning of the Indian Army. With decades of operational leadership and command experience, General Arun brings invaluable perspective on how India's military doctrine is adapting to emerging theaters and multi-domain realities. He is actually an IIT ranker who gave up his IIT seat to join the NDA. He has also served in UN peacekeeping missions at the UN headquarters in New York, Cambodia, and in Sierra Leone. He holds multiple master's degree and is highly decorated. And he is, needless to say, a very popular leader. And we in the Deccan Centre we had a glimpse of this when he participated during the Deccan Youth Conclave, which he had sometime earlier this month. And this was focused on the university students doing international relations in the various colleges and universities in Chennai. So welcome to the podcast, General Arun. We are very, very happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
In fact, South India, it has a huge coastline of, little less than 6,500 kilometers. And that's including Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And Andaman and Nicobar Islands are critical to the maritime security of India and indeed to the region as well, since they sit astride the maritime crossroads, if I may use the word, between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans. Which includes the Malacca Straits and beyond. They house India's only integrated tri-services theatre command. And they monitor global trade routes and play, a very crucial role in monitoring Chinese movements in this area and also the growing maritime presence of the Chinese. And I understand that our presence in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is also now being strengthened even further. And the facilities which we have are also being considerably enhanced. So I just wanted to get a sense from you, what is really being planned and what are the implications of these changes which are being brought about in our Andaman and Nicobar and broadly in that particular area.
So I'll start at the beginning. We overlook many times what history does to us. And I think while we complain to those who made the maps about how they configured boundaries along our northern continental boundaries and the problems it creates for us, I think we have to be really grateful to our founding fathers who forced the inclusion of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands into the Indian nation. It does 2 things for us. It extends our exclusive economic zone by a fair bit. It also giving a north-south extension of our boundary at a crossroads of where the world's businesses transit. So it gives us in many ways a lighthouse or a bird's eye view of all traffic that passes those straits at the 6-degree channel specifically, and the entry to the Malacca Straits, which the Chinese and the rest of East Asia transit passes through. So economically, I can't call it a gold mine. I don't know what is more precious than gold, but it's a mine that is, it's a resource that's waiting to be tapped.
That's true.
Militarily, it gives you a presence there. In many ways, it extends your reach by a few thousand kilometers. Because islands tend to have larger coastlines, it increases your coastline. I think your viewers would be very interested to know that just the coastline of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is a little more than the sum total of the coastline of all the 4 southern land states.
That's true.
Peninsular states.
That's true.
That is how big a coastline we are talking about. Now, what is the plan for the Andaman and Nicobar? Little bit of trivia again before that. When we look at our neighboring countries, it's easy to look at the map of India and say, okay, we'll start from the west and we'll go, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, China, Myanmar, Bangladesh. It's very easy to do that and leave it there. Probably somebody would include Afghanistan a little further northwest and Sri Lanka in the south. Maybe go to the Maldives on the west. But very few of us go to Indonesia. The fact is, the southernmost Andaman and Nicobar island of the Nicobar group of islands is just 140 kilometers north of the northernmost island of Sumatra, which technically makes Indonesia a maritime neighbor.
Correct.
And is just 140 kilometers. So that's broadly what geography does for us. Now, if you were to turn the map of India around, upside down, or the map of the world upside down, which by my friends in the Navy are very fond of doing, suddenly you see India has virtually no land boundaries. It's just a southern peninsula with the whole blue ocean around it. And then they would say, look at this, this is our frontier. And as young officers, we used to find it very amusing because we grew up on land mass and land borders and threats.
Absolutely.
But this is a completely new area. Should we have developed it a long time back, the Andaman Nicobar group of islands? Yes. But we still are a growing nation with conflicting, contesting priorities, each of which need to be addressed. So everything will come up in its time. I think given the recent strategic events in the world around us and the size of our economy now, we are now in a position to actually look at it and decide what we need to do. So it's called the Strategic Initiative for the Andaman Nicobar Islands. It's a four-pronged piece of action, or it stands on 4 pillars. Just the Great Nicobar Island plan is going to cost us about 80,000 crores over its lifetime. And comprises 4 things essentially. In what sequence do I put it? I think the first thing is a giant power plant, which will be both gas and solar based. This power plant is intended to power all the other resources that will be built around it. So this power plant in itself is a mega project.
Yes.
Now, next to that power plant will probably come what we want to call a great transit hub. This is the economy part of it. We still use the facilities of Singapore, Hong Kong, some parts of Sri Lanka for our giant container ships, because not all our ports are large container friendly. So we bulk break there and bring it to smaller containers and bring it to our shores. So the coastline of the Nicobar Islands allow us to create such a port. Now, it's obviously a huge venture on its own, which is why the enormous cost.
That's true.
But that port will come up. Now, when that port does come up, it does two things for us. Our reliance on other foreign ports will come down proportionately, one. Two, on its own, we will then become a regional hub for other routes based out of the southern Sumatra Islands. Could Australia be one such, any port in Australia on the western coast be one such port? Why not? Why not the rest of the further coast of East Asia? Why not into the Malacca Straits? Why not into, I dare say, go into the South Pacific, to the Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, PNG, Papua New Guinea group of islands. Nobody knows where it will go, but you need a container port of that size. The visualization is, I think, 16 million TEU per year. That's the vision. How soon we can get there is a matter of discussion. So this is the second thing. So the giant port.
Correct.
The next thing that we are looking at is to increase the runway. There is an existing airstrip there. To increase the runway and make it to about 3,500 feet, which allows for the fly in and fly out of these wide-bodied jet aircraft. I think at the moment it is proposed to be a dual use, military and domestic. Will it help in air cargo movement? 100%. Will it help in extending a strategic military reach? 100%. Does it in a way provide us protection to peninsular, at least eastern peninsular southern India? Inherently, because of the presence of large military troops on the coast on our east? 100%. Now, this also is a huge project because you extend a runway, create the transit facilities, infrastructure hubs, warehousing. Now, when you put these three together, you're looking at a lot of people. Now, that's the fourth pillar. And that fourth pillar is the construction or the creation of a mega island city, if you wish. Now, currently, the island is occupied by 8,000 people, about, give or take a few. And we're looking at upwards of 650,000. That's a fair bit. So you would require a greenfield city to come up with all the infrastructure support which a city requires.
Correct.
Now, this is the broad plan which will unfold over probably the next decade or decade and a half, and incrementally. Which one comes first? I do believe that they will all start together in a small way, instead of one first and then the other.
That's true.
But I do believe they feed off each other. So I think they will all need to come up together. Sorry, that was a kind of a long answer.
No, absolutely. It is actually bang on target, because it's important that we look at this holistically. It is not just about one or the other. You've given a fantastic perspective. No, in fact, I'm absolutely delighted to hear this very comprehensive perspective which you have just given us, and that too, something which is absolutely critical for India's security. And, also talking about integrated theatre commands. Now, the creation of integrated theatre commands is being planned. It's probably one of the most significant changes which you are bringing about, I think, practically since independence. It's as a reform. And so firstly, I just wanted to get a perspective from you, particularly for our people who are going to listen to the podcast, of what exactly does this mean for us. And from your time, of course, in strategic planning and as chief of staff, what do you think are the opportunities and the challenges in shifting from a single service command to a joint and adversary focused type of theatre command, especially in terms of asset allocation, command authority, and operational decision making, etc. I just wanted to get a sense from you on this whole things which are being done, and that to a very significant set of reforms.
So once more, I'm very fond of history, so I like to go back where we came from, because history teaches us many lessons, and like you know better than me, if you don't learn those lessons, you're doomed to repeat those mistakes. Um, how much of our governance mechanism in general and our armed forces in specific have transformed after independence? And the answer, unfortunately and sadly, is very little.
Oh, okay.
We still inherit so many of the older processes and systems and checks and measures and traditions even. To the extent I would go to say that we probably haven't Indianized the Indian armed forces enough. What does Indianize mean? I will leave it to the audience to infer.
No, it also depends on the threat perception which
Correct,
we face.
correct.
That is really the
Correct.
Indianization.
Now I'm talking about purely military now.
Okay.
So in our design, in our construct, in our warfighting philosophy, did we have a warfighting philosophy historically before we became part of the Commonwealth and got left out because we became part of the Commonwealth? The fact is, when we became part of the Commonwealth, we were part of the British Army. What happened before that? We still had kings who had armies, who had navies. They didn't have an air force, but they had all of this, and they did all of this, and there was strategy, there was doctrine, there was training, there were soldiers, there were formations, there were processes, there was communication, there was logistics, there was all of this.
Correct.
It's all there. So we didn't transform as rapidly. Again, probably because we were in the first 75 odd years of our existence, we've had to fight a fair few battles periodically, both external and internal, because this process of nation building is constant. Probably we didn't have enough time and energy to focus on a large scale transformation, because the transformation requires a stable environment.
Correct.
Because when you're unstable and you transform, you're enhancing the instability of the change of the organization. So that's the background. Now, at the very apex are the theatre commands. That's probably the strategic level of policy formulation and plan making. At the bottom end, or at the front end if you wish, is the soldier. Now the question which you didn't ask me, which you probably plan to ask me hereafter, I wouldn't know, is that there is an Agniveer there.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that Agniveer is a change which is happening at that 17-year-old age of recruitment of our soldier into the armed forces. And at the top end, you're looking at theatre commands. Now, are we in a position to absorb all these changes together? We have no choice. Okay. Now, why have theatres come about? Firstly, what is the genesis of a theatre? What does a theatre mean? Now, in an area of operations, you have a land-based commander who's an army general like I was, or a brigadier or a colonel, depending upon the scale. You have an Air Force component, so you have an Air Force officer who brings that Air Force component. If it's a tri-service operation going across island territory, you have a naval component which does that. Now, do all three report to different people? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So, is there a seamless integration of these three entities together to go into battle, or does that coordination happen only at the headquarter level? So far, we relied on this coordination happening at the highest levels. That's how we plan. And then this system worked for us. You know, we got the air support when we needed, we got the naval support when we needed. When they required army support, a contingent went and did the job, and it worked. But that's the 18th, 19th century style of battle. Today's style of battle or warfare is far more swift, far more agile, far more technical, which requires decisions to be made in split seconds, which requires seamless transfer of information, which requires a seamless and high-tech integration of sources from different formats in one screen, if you wish. Yeah. And for people of different Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, diplomats, even maybe the strategic level decision makers in the governance, to sit together in one place, make one decision and convey it to one person who gets the job executed in time. The time was the most critical factor.
Absolutely.
This is one in terms of speed of reaction and decision making. So you needed one. The second thing is quite simply, in the modern world, and I'm sure in the olden days as well, the kings would have had it, I do not know what they called him, the equivalent of an auditor, a system analyst if you wish, an efficiency generator if you wish. Now when you step back and see your three arms, look at the Coast Guard also as one now, because they also form a significant role. So there's the Army, Navy, Air Force and the Coast Guard. I would say put the country's armed forces also into the pot. If all of us use a weapon, where does India buy that weapon from? Do we buy it from one source, or do we all negotiate separately? Currently, we all negotiate separately. And that adds to multiple problems, because your 20 people are buying the same piece of equipment from the same manufacturer globally. So 20 contracts, you look at the magnitude of everything else that we do which is wasted. Now look at space. When did you last see an armed forces base? You would have seen an Air Force station. You would have seen a naval station. You would have seen an army unit. Can they work together out of one complex? Even if you have to do some of your work separately, minimize on communication network, resources, manpower, admin, so many things. I don't know, my numbers are sure, but I think just by mixing together or integrating the logistic support systems, peacetime logistic support systems, I think we would save India up to between 15 to 20% of expenditure on peacetime logistic support, which is a small fortune.
Absolutely.
So at the bottom end or at the non-war fighting end, this was a need.
That's true.
At the highest level, I told you why we need to make decisions quickly. Now, in terms of equipment, all of us are mandated with one job: to defend the territorial integrity of the country. And when we are given a sub-task, to fulfill this large task, you have to do ABC, that is the aim. Now, if we are going to use three different resources, the key to the resource is not the resource itself, but the doctrine which powers the utilization of that resource. Now, this doctrine translates to training manuals. This training manual is what is applied to soldiers, sailors or airmen at the front end who use this weapon. Now, this doctrine also needs to be common if the weapon system is common. Its repair mechanisms need to be common. So, seamlessly, the same equipment can be integrated across the three services. Now, if the officers and the men grow up in a integrated atmosphere, their ability to understand the nuances, I will never have to fight on sea as an army man. But I need to understand how naval warfare is waged and what are the nuances, what are the threats, what are the sensitivities, what are the weaknesses, what are the strengths. Only then will I be able to participate effectively in its utilization or plan formulation.
That's true.
Now, when you integrate the theatre at the top end, all these start falling into place.
That's true.
It cannot go down up. It has to come top up. These are broadly the reasons for the theatre. The other thing that we realized is there is no such conflict or war that is today fought in a single dimension. And we can look at conflicts around us. We can look at the two large conflicts that are happening in the world at the moment, Russia, Ukraine, and what's happening in West Asia. Is it an army war? Is it by use of airspace? Is it technology? Is it cyber at work? Is it the Navy? Is it the Air Force? Are these ground troops which are doing all this? The answer is all of these. Now, if all of these are led and controlled by one person in one commander, then the effort is coordinated the effect is multiplied and a synergy is driven. This was the base logic for the creation of the theatres.
No, I think you have explained it very beautifully. I think everything coming together. But does it have a ripple effect, the whole thing?
It will, once the theatre commander. Now, how do we create the theatres? Is the theatre going to be a geographic entity bound to a certain geography? In our case, probably yes. Everywhere in the world also, a theatre, that's why you call it a theatre.
That's true.
So it's an Eastern theatre, Northern theatre, Western theatre. The name may be whatever, it doesn't matter. So once you have a theatre and you have a designated theatre commander, that theatre commander is responsible for the prosecution of all warfare or all tasks assigned to him or her in that theatre. Now, when you make it seamless, we get to that question of yours of allocation of resource.
Yeah.
Now, we have, let's say, hypothetically, 10 resources all over the country. The Northern Theatre, because 2 resources are located inside the Northern Theatre geographically, may initially form part of the Northern Theatre for purposes of administration, training, execution, rehearsals and so on. But if in a conflict, the Northern Theatre is not being used or addressed at all, these resources will have the ability to seamlessly transit to the Eastern or Western or Southern or maritime or aerospace or wherever it may be required.
Yeah.
Because a common theatre would also drive a common doctrine, would also drive a common training philosophy, would also drive commonalities of communication styles, and so on and so forth. So this trickle-down effect will become automatic. Currently, they're in stovepipes.
And the command structure?
I don't think it's an issue.
It's not an issue.
I personally don't think it's an issue. Because we already have numerous tri-service establishments where the leadership, you could be working out of an office in Delhi, for example, and wearing a army green uniform, and the person you're reporting to may be a naval officer or an Air Force officer. There are training establishments, a joint service. The National Defence Academy in Pune is a tri-service establishment. The College of Defence Management in Secunderabad, where colonel level officers go on, is a tri-service establishment. The National Defence College in Delhi is a tri-service establishment. Our Staff College in Wellington is a tri-service establishment. The Andaman and Nicobar Command is a tri-service establishment. So we have a fair few. Even if you wish to put it this way, have we tried it before? Do we know it will work? We've tried it for over a couple of decades now. Yeah. Nothing is broken. In fact, I think in offices, so I was before the Chief of Strategic Planning, it used to be called Perspective Planning. So I was DG Perspective Planning. And in my office in Sena Bhavan in Delhi, I had an Air Force officer and a naval officer. And I dare say they were as effective contributors to anything army that we discussed as any of their army colleagues. So I think when they came and left, they left behind a piece of their own service and they took a piece of our service. Now, this has happened over 20 years.
That's true. That's true.
So I think there is a fair level. We need to take that decision and move towards that decision.
Now, I just wanted to also, talk about these emerging technologies which are coming. The Defence Forces vision of 2047, it emphasizes new domains like artificial intelligence, drones, cyber, space, and also hypersonics, and even proposed structures such as a drone force, data force, and cognitive warfare action force. So I just wanted to get a sense of how is the Indian Army, the military preparing, for this, and particularly multi-domain operations which you are going to have. And you are a person who, been gazing into the future, both in service and even now you talk about what will happen, and how are we going to look at all these emerging technologies. So, what are these, and how does the future scenario look like?
Okay, I think one thing is undeniable. I hope it never happens. But when the next war does happen, it will be nothing like we have ever seen in the past. And if you think that what we saw in Op Sindoor was a trailer, I am afraid the movie is going to be nothing like the trailer. So therefore, it's always important to prepare for what may come rather than prepare for what has happened. What has happened should teach you what you need to do, but you need to prepare for something that has not happened. Which means that constantly everybody has to be thinking of something new, may be unlikely at this moment, but it's the unlikely that will give you a problem. What is likely you can always risk mitigate and plan for. Now, how will it unfold? Now, we've seen the conflict in West Asia. The fact is, it's a global conflict of enormous technological powers at the very cutting edge of military technology as it exists. Two of the greatest military tech powers are engaged against a seemingly weaker Iran. It's probably now the 30th day or the 31st day as we speak.
That's true.
Yet the proverbial straw that's got to break the camel's back is nowhere on the horizon. Not a single foot soldier on ground has still been used. Not a single military piece of equipment which is firing against a ground target face to face has been fired. Not one soldier has in his weapon set his sights on another soldier and pressed the trigger. And yet they're at war. Now, behind what we don't see is enormous technologies at work. So is there use of the cyberspace effectively? 100%. Is there use of space resources? Yes. There's not been an occasion to use a space-based weapon in this context, but if there were, you can be sure it would have been used. The spread of the conventional weapon systems that has been used is very far. Have autonomous weapon systems been used in this conflict as of now? We don't yet know. But unmanned systems, the conflict is full of unmanned systems. To put all this together, you need a strategy that encompasses this, that is willing to use this. To convert this strategy into practice, you need a doctrine, a robust doctrine as to how to use these. That doctrine will naturally feed into what we in the armed forces call as tactics, techniques, and procedures. Now, quite simply, if you and I were soldiers at the front end, soldiers, sailors, airmen, it would tell us how to use this piece of equipment, how to troubleshoot it in case it doesn't work properly. And it would train the other soldier, sailor, or airman how to repair this. So, which means that everybody needs a tech upgrade.
Absolutely.
Now, the tech upgrade, we are fond of using the word training. Personally, I am fond of using the word education. Because I believe if you're educated, you can absorb the training faster and more efficiently. Quite simply, it was put in a Hindi movie, I think you can train circus lions. But, human beings need education.
That's true.
The training will happen on its own. So we focus excessively on training and less on education. I think that shift has already happened across multiple layers of the armed forces. So the Agniveer system, where now a soldier, sailor, or airman has to give a written examination, precedes the physical requirements. So how does it work? Previously, we did the physical first. So everybody who was physically fit was brought into the funnel and then asked to give an exam. And of those who qualified the exam, we took them in. We've just turned it around now. We do the entrance test first. So cerebrally, if you clear it, then you come for the physical test. So which means that anybody who's cleared that physical test is also cerebrally eligible.
Yeah.
So that's changed the LCM of the capacity of the soldier to think. One. Two, the techniques which are available to teach and train have changed exponentially. So you're able to teach remotely, you're able to teach using electronic devices.
We are using all this.
All of these. There are simulators, there are virtual reality, there's artificial intelligence in some limited manner, because artificial intelligence needs huge amounts of data, which you're aware of. We're in the process of, these are all works in progress. They're all happening across the spectrum at the level of a soldier to the level of a general. So what a general is exposed to in terms of overseas education, we study at foreign universities, we train with other armies, we imbibe certain concepts of theirs, we Indianize it in a way, and these lessons are sent down. So all this is happening at the same time. What is also happening is a change in the country. 30 years back, we probably had no defense manufacturers. Manufacturing in defense was not even a reasonable business opportunity for multiple reasons. We were not buying enough. It's very niche product. Volumes are very less. Payments may be delayed. There were government contracts where if you defaulted, payments could, get probably stuck also at times, and multiple reasons. The last 15 years has seen a huge change. We are actually now in a position where we put out our defense procurement policy on the web and invite comments before that policy is cast. And then the policy gets amended, and there are multiple schemes. We've invested in academia. So today, there is great, robust conversation between the armed forces, industry, and academia. So the R&D is getting better. The Make in India proposal of the government and the push for Atmanirbharta has changed multiple things. The requirement for overseas foreign companies, defense manufacturers to outsource a certain minimum of their products from India, even if it be through transfer of technology, has resulted in multiple things. Now all these have started making a difference. I think now the time is right to tie it all together and create that finished product. And I think the theatre and the establishment of the CDS as an operational head it's the logical next step in that direction.
No, in fact, I was actually coming to that. I'm glad you touched on it. Under Atmanirbharta and the defense production reforms and even the defense acquisition norms that are being overhauled, and indigenization through positive lists, IDEX, private sector participation, and the record domestic procurement allocations. I think these are all being pushed, I think, as a part of the current reforms. Now, the involvement of our private sector, I think this has now become integral to our search for self-reliance. And so I think, how has this push for self-reliance, which we are doing right now, and how is this evolving? And, India is now trying to position itself as a global defense manufacturer and export hub. Now, that is, I think, definitely the next step which we are going to take, and we are aiming towards that. But that will involve not just indigenization, bringing in private sector, but it will also involve maintaining the quality and the timelines. So I think, how are we going towards this? Of course, I know the defense acquisition procedures and all that is being changed, but also on this front, manufacturing front. So what are the...
So I'll start with an anecdote. I work with multiple universities, so I meet young people across the country. Without exception, in every college or university across this country that I've been to, there is always this young woman or a young girl who says, I've created this. How do I get it tested in a live military establishment? There is somebody who's made a camera for a UAV. There is somebody who says this is a test pod There is somebody I met a couple of days back who said he's made a drone which has got a release mechanism that can work, outstandingly. These are all kids who are working. These are college projects which they are doing. Now, cut to the next level. The establishment of defense corridors. I think where we've made some ground, but we need a little more work there, is to make every technology multi-use. The moment we encourage a technology that is only single military use, it becomes too small a market for that person who's investing money to realize the profit which comes out of it. I think with little modification, the technology should be multi-use. Can drones only be used in conflict? Or can a port use a drone? Can a warehouse owner use drones? Can a farmer use drones? Can somebody who's got a cattle farm use drones? I don't know. In Kodaikanal, I happened to see a young man using a very basic quadcopter purely to carry strawberries from the field to the road.
Okay.
So previously, the strawberry would be carried on the back of labor.
Correct.
So if you carried 20 kilos, about 500 grams would get crushed or smashed. Now, a little 2 kilo pack hangs on the quadcopter and it comes up, his wife receives it, it goes down, receives it. Is that use of technology? I think so. Can we make one customized for him to use in his agricultural field? The technology is the same, the drone is the same, the rotors are the same, the engine is the same, the guidance the same. Some small things will change. These have started happening big time. The establishment of these defense corridors, which we've done for the family, the ecosystem of factories. The Tamil Nadu one is fairly robust, but that's because Tamil Nadu already has a very, very highly developed industrial base. So modifying that base to suit military products while serving commercial civil needs was pretty easy. That is happening in a big way. The number of projects involving children, school, when I'm saying children, young adults, even children, at varying levels, starting from a technology which may not be commonly seen, something to do with the use of cyberspace, something in satellites, something which is back-end technology, processing speeds, and so on and so forth, to encryptions, to communications. These are the non-military component of the military life. From there to missiles and guidance systems and aerofoil manufacturing and new airframes and designs and higher speed engines and liquid propulsion, solid propulsion, greater ranges, better navigation, more explosive, better explosive delivery systems, control systems, navigation. All this is happening. There, I cannot give you a number as to how many small or large companies are involved in this, but I can tell you, in the last decade, that number has multiplied many times.
That's true.
There will be a time when we will not see any result. Because that graph will stay there. We just need to persist. Because when this graph changes, it's not going to change, one by one. It's going to change exponentially. That's how it will increase.
I think right now, as you correctly said, the question is scaling up. I think the opportunities for scaling up is happening now.
All these are coming together. You look at, for a moment, let's deviate from the specific topic and look at space. As we speak, there's a Hyderabad-based company which is readying for a launch from Sriharikota. It's probably the first time. So are we even outsourcing a government-owned space launch facility to a private vendor to launch his or her satellites? Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need 3 more of these, not just one.
We have in IIT,
Yes.
Pravartak,
Yes.
there is.
So, and there are multiple such ventures happening. And you talk to scaling up. Now, scaling up in India essentially boils down to one thing: availability of capital. That is the
That's true.
break point. And I think with the now presence of a large number of big players in the defense industry, they have now, previously all R&D was also owned by them. But today you have a kid sitting in Hyderabad or Kakinada or Thoothukudi or Bellary or Kochi or wherever, who's capable of creating that design or product. Now, these larger defense players have now also started doing the job of aggregators. They are quite happy to just play the role of aggregator and say, these are your 40 subsystems, you keep making them. I will just be the aggregator and I will put my money muscle and marketing muscle and negotiating muscle and contracting muscle behind it. Because you do need these muscle. So I think that has also started happening in a big way. The government's policies have also helped. The availability of venture capitalists and investors who are Indian citizens, who are now willing to invest their money, is also significantly changed. Any VC meeting or angel investors meeting in any city that one attends, at least 30 to 35% of what they want to put their money into, the ideas have a military component to what they do. I think the time is just right. It will all come together. We just have to persevere. There will be a time in the very near future when suddenly this tree will start bearing fruit. Currently, it's a tree that's grown.
That's true.
It will bear fruit soon, I think.
In fact, all this coming together is quite heartening, because I think I'm going to ask you about something which we have seen ourselves in the recent past, and that is the challenges which we have on our borders. I mean, we have a variety of challenges, to say the least, and we have just seen recently how the Chinese have helped Pakistan during Operation Sindoor. And, they have what they call as the ironclad partnership with Pakistan. And so I just wanted to get a sense from you. So what was the nature of the Chinese role in Operation Sindoor? Because, of course, we have seen a plethora of information which has come out in the media. But, I just thought someone like you will explain how is it that they made a difference to the Pakistani way of looking at what they had done. And we are also now taking up restructuring of our postures, which we just discussed, to combat this type of a situation. So how was it? What was the Chinese help? What sort of an impact did it have? And I just wanted to get a sense from you on this.
So I start very bluntly. Operation Sindoor, we were not just fighting Pakistan. We were fighting Pakistan, China, and Turkey.
Yeah, absolutely. This is exactly the point.
Yeah. So, what was the nature of Chinese support to Pakistan? Let's again rewind a little bit. I said I like history, so let's go 5 years back. In the last 5 years, all Pakistani military acquisitions, 81% of them are of Chinese origin.
81%.
82, give or take
Whatever.
a few.
Absolutely.
Approximately. Yeah. In the last 5 years. Now, military equipment can be even 30 years old. So, it is not that 80% of their equipment is Chinese, but in the last 5 years. Now, obviously, purchases which you make recently will be more of high-tech nature than those of the past. That's the nature of it. And this war was fairly high-tech as high-tech goes. How did it start? The Pakistan-China marriage, if you wish, started in 63 or 64 with the formal handing over of the Shaksgam region to the Chinese. And then Pakistan was the first non-communist country to fly a commercial passenger plane to China. So that's the history. Over the years, through multiple conflicts, China has always insisted that Pakistan is their good friend and that they value their friendship. And Pakistan has reciprocated in the same manner. Over the last 5 years, that friendship has taken a completely significant military turn in reference to your conversation. One thing is to purchase somebody's equipment. But what we saw in Operation Sindoor over those 88 hours, over 4 days in May, was not just the equipment. We saw a replication of the doctrine. We saw, to some extent, replication of the manner of utilization of that equipment. Now, typically, these are very independent nationalist views. I may have an equipment, I will still use it my style. But if I'm using it your style, that means along with the equipment, you're also transferring to me a textbook. So what we saw play out was a classic Chinese textbook. Now this indicates an extraordinary high level of integration, because you're talking of now training. You're talking of multiple joint exercises. You're talking of how I shape the way you think. This happens over many, many decades of very, very close fraternization. That is what we saw during Operation Sindoor. Now, in terms of specific equipment and areas, so many. There is a intelligence and surveillance. We saw the use of the Beidou satellite system which the Chinese have. We saw the air defense systems. We saw the airborne warning aircrafts. We saw the air-to-air beyond visual range. Now, for your audience, beyond visual range is quite simply, I'm flying an aircraft which is on the Afghan border, and midway over Pakistan airspace is the airborne early warning systems, and there's an Indian aircraft that is taken off from Pathankot. This aircraft sees the Indian aircraft, guides this aircraft to fire a missile. This radar then controls this missile, and that is beyond visual range. So that Pakistani pilot flying the Chinese aircraft some 400 kilometers away from Pathankot doesn't even see the target. He's just told where to fire and what to fire, and the rest is done. So all this we saw manifested in different forms. In one of the debris of the recovered missiles on the Indian side, we saw what was clearly markings of a Chinese missile system. Is that enough proof? I mean, it is a Chinese missile system at the end of it. So obviously it was sold and transferred. And these are high-tech systems. You cannot just buy them off the shelf. This is through governmental sanctions and permissions. So much of this was easily visible. Now, translate this to the next higher level diplomatically, and you know this better than me. The Chinese have blocked references to terror incidents in the Security Council on numerous occasions. They have refused to condemn it, so much so that the Honorable Defence Minister had to step away from a meeting without signing the final statement. That's what the Chinese have done. How are we prepared to handle it? Now, Turkey also put across its multiple drone systems. They have a very advanced family of drone systems which they've used, and their drones have been used across conflicts all over the world. In the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict, some of it in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I dare say some of it also would have been visible in the West Asian conflict as it's unfolding. If not the same drone, the same family of drones with technologies having been passed on both officially and unofficially. They supported Pakistan diplomatically, in public, and through military support, ideological of course. The Chief of Defence Staff in a conference last year in July, I think, I don't remember the date, did mention that the collusion of Pakistan, China and Bangladesh is not improbable. Does that mean we're going to fight a three-front physical war on ground? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that if you have threatening forces on so much of your land boundary, it does, if nothing else, consume a lot of your resources just to be a deterrent to that threat. It doesn't mean you'll have soldiers walking across on all three sides of our land boundary, but just means a hostile environment. Is that possible? Very much possible. How do we overcome that? Multiple ways. But this is what the Chinese have done.
No, this is not going to stop. I think it's going to get worse. That's the way I look at it, because they are trying to hem India in on all sides, and we can see it already. But this is something actually a bit of a, I think, an eye opener. And that brings me to, in fact, the last question which I wanted to ask you. Media in warfare. And that once again, we have seen what was happening in Operation Sindoor. And I think media and the narratives which they are putting out have started playing, obviously, a very critical role in warfare. And, apart from in Operation Sindoor, of course, we saw how the Pakistani propaganda machine, in some ways, I would say bested in some ways. I don't know what else to say. I think somewhere they carried a message which reached far more people, and probably, and we had a very sober message to put out, quite obviously. But their message seems to have started shaping the global perception as the operation was unfolding. And so my only thing was that how did this unfold during Operation Sindoor? But more than a post-mortem, the question is, how do we start playing this game of narratives being put out? And I'm talking about genuine narratives. I'm not talking about disinformation from our side. Obviously, we knew what was happening, and we put out that information, but it was not consumed quite well. The wrong information which was put out got consumed. So how do you see this shaping up?
I think that's a great question. We talked of how warfare has evolved and how it manifests today. And we, in this clutter of missiles and aircraft and soldiers and border, and we forgot the power of the common person and the power of the handheld electronic device that they have, and the fact that their mind creates this mass which can either support or defeat a conflict worldwide. Public opinion. We just forgot about public opinion. Now, creating or shaping perception also affects the perceptions of the adversary. And in Chanakya wrote this many years back, that you win the war without fighting it. This is what he meant with whatever tools he had then. Did we lose the battle of the narratives in Op Sindoor? I don't think we lost it, because we were never in that battle. We were just not there. Traditionally, the Pakistanis have been better at the mental mind games than we have been. That's not an issue, but it's something that we need to address for the next conflict. I think we've learned that lesson very clearly, which is why in the aftermath of those 88 hours, we had to send these multiple delegations of parliamentarians to multiple countries to explain why we did what we did. You could have done it from day one or minus day one. You could have shaped the perceptions of the anguish of the people who lost their lives, how it affected us as a nation, what we can do. Now, that is information. Now, you talked of we should not go into misinformation. I think you can actually weaponize this part of warfare by also cleverly using misinformation. It's as potent and as important as putting out the right information. I think we did not utilize the strength of the numbers of young people whom we have in our country, the people who can receive one information and transmit it to 5. And the numbers of people we have who can do this, subject to a common narrative which the government's or the nation's purpose must be fulfilled. I think that lesson has been aptly learned, and at multiple levels of governance, organizations have been tweaked or new organizations formed which will only do this. And I think we now will have our own army of so-called non-armed armchair warriors, if you will, who will fight this battle of the narrative, both for pushing out the right information in the right time and for pushing out the wrong information at the right time.
That's true.
Both, I think, are being readied and will happen in very, very large numbers.
The thing is also that probably we focused a lot more, whatever we put out in the media during that time, we focused a lot more on the domestic audience. I think we did not cater necessarily to an international audience?
We didn't have a plan. So we did everything on the go. Now, when you act on the go, there are some things which you will overlook because just what's in front of you you will react to that. So, if we had a plan, we would have catered different pieces of content in different forms for different audiences, but all conveying the same story. And I think that storytelling or that piece of strategic information, use of information to achieve a strategic objective, will manifest in the next war, and that's a certainty.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you, General Arun. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I think you have also explained in very simple terms a very complex subject, for which I'm delighted that you could do that. And also, I think from whatever I can gather, there is a lot happening, and I think it's all for the better. I think we are moving towards a situation where we can be ready for the future, which is a really heartening message which you have given us. And thank you once again for sparing the time and being with us.
I've enjoyed this conversation. It's scratched parts of my brain which probably were not used for a long time. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.